Many people who darken the doorstep of the Poe Museum often ask us, who was Edgar Allan Poe? Why is there an entire museum dedicated to him? So we thought we'd let you know.
Edgar Allan Poe was a prolific American writer from the 1800s. Although he wrote in many different genres, Poe is best known for his tales of horror. You might recognize his poem The Raven, in which a dark, winged creature torments a man deep in grief over his lost love. Or perhaps you've heard of The Telltale Heart, a short story about a man who kills his roommate and leaves the dismembered body under the floorboards, only to hear the beating of the dead man's heart.
So why does Poe have a museum dedicated to him? Well, there are a lot of answers to that question, but one reason is that Poe revolutionized the genre of horror. Before Poe, most horror stories revolved around some supernatural being. Think Frankenstein or Dracula. Poe is one of the first writers to make stories where the true monster is actually the potential for evil that is inside each and every one of us. His most famous stories, like Telltale Heart or The Black Cat, show average, everyday people performing unspeakable acts. Poe wrote with a deep understanding of abnormal psychology in the 1800s that can, for the most part, still completely terrify us today.
Poe did not just write horror. In fact, most of his stories are comedies. Interestingly enough, Poe also invented the detective story. He was the first to write about an eccentric genius who helps the police solve crimes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even cites Poe's character, C. Auguste Dupin, as the inspiration behind his character, Sherlock Holmes. Doyle's also quoted as saying, "Where was the detective story until Poe breathed the breath of life into it?" Poe also wrote science fiction pieces. Jules Verne even wrote a sequel to Poe's only novella, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket.
You can't forget about Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. Poe published around 50 poems. Some of them you might recognize, like Annabel Lee, To Helen, The Bells, and of course The Raven. Poe's verse ranged from love poetry to mystery and beyond, and encompassed a variety of metrical patterns. Poe always wrote with the spoken word in mind, and created some extraordinary lyrical tales in verse.
There is a lot of debate about Poe, the man behind the stories. Some accounts paint him as a loving family man. Others call him a drunkard and a womanizer. Scholars and casual readers alike debate whether any of Poe's stories were autobiographical or inspired by the madness of his own life and mind. Like many of things about Poe, those answers will remain a mystery.
Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about Edgar Allan Poe, leave them in the comments. Or join us on Patreon for a more in-depth look into Poe and our collection here. And don't forget to visit us here at the Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia.